Hey, Alexander. Thank you for joining the integration podcast. Tell me a bit about who is Alexander?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. My name is Alex Schmidt. I'm in Switzerland and I'm a co-founder of a small company here called Value Insights. And our main business is actually training in the area of service management, everything around ITIL4, the latest version, right? And everything around Scrum and also the scaled version of that, which is done by Scaled Agile.
Mm.
And we do provide these trainings online, also in-house for companies, mainly for companies and for businesses. And but we also do it for private people if there is any interest, like public classes and so on.
Yeah.
And besides that, we are also running a blog around these topics, creating also mock exams, which can be downloaded by people who are preparing for any of these exams.
Okay. So I was wondering, Alex. So regarding ITIL, how is that in Switzerland? How is it? Is it a big thing? Is this what type of companies are working with ITIL at the moment?
It's getting there. I mean, it's not that fast paced as it might be in different other countries. I've seen, like in India, it's written very big.
Mm.
Also, the fourth version now of ITIL in Switzerland, people take it a little bit more, slowly. A little bit more, stability is fine, but more and more companies are getting into it. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm looking forward to maybe train a little bit more as well.
Mm.
But it takes some time. There are some additional regulations in Switzerland, especially around data security and information security, which need to be adhered to, and there people are a bit more, cautious
Yeah,
before
yeah,
jumping into anything new and fancy.
yeah. And but like rolling out like such a project, is that taking a long time, or could you describe a bit the what is ITIL exactly in a nutshell for these
Yeah,
people
yeah,
who don't know that?
sure. Basically, we're talking about a framework, a collection of good practices in the area of service management, which kind of help us to work out what our company should be doing to actually be able to deliver value or actually co-create value to our customers. One of
Hmm.
the fancy new terms in ITIL4, it's all about this collaboration between service providers and customers to be able to deliver something that is in the end very valuable to those customers. And ITL has been around for a long time now. Um, Gone through
Yeah,
different
exactly.
versions, right? Yeah, I mean the latest version was version 3, right? There was an iteration of it released in 2011, so it has been around for some time now.
But already since 2011. Wow.
Yeah, actually 2007 was the very first version release of version 3.
Yeah.
And then in 2011, I got an update that was around since then. And then, yeah, last year, no, actually the year before, so 2019, ETL4 was finally released, and it was a big jump. I mean, it was a huge difference between the two versions, and
So
that's
so so
why.
yeah. So what's a big differences between the two exactly?
Well, one of the main differences is that the lifecycle model, which has been introduced in version 3, is gone. You don't have service strategy, service transition, service design, service operation. Those are gone. The
Hmm.
activities are still done, but they're organized differently. There is currently there is a service value system, which is a new construct, which tells us what kinds of major things we should have in place in a company to be successful. And there is stuff like governance, continual improvement, and there is another one. One major part is the service value chain, which is this new operating model, which practically defines what activities every service provider organization should do on a high level to be able to deliver valuable services to the customer. But how that's done, it's not prescribed, because it's best practice, but it doesn't tell you exactly, like, step by step what needs to be done. It's much more guidance now
Hmm.
than it has been before.
Okay. So could you give an example of such a value system that has been implemented?
Um, yeah, sure. I mean, basically, we are talking about activities like we had before in that life cycle. We're talking about that we need to engage with customers. We need to have
Mhm.
some kind of planning in place, but it's not prescribed that we should do like this traditional V model of planning and testing like we knew it before in service management. It's much more an adaptation from different other frameworks and practices that have been around for some time now, especially in the agile world. So when ETIL says we need to plan, it doesn't mean that we need to have like a huge upfront plan, like we know it from, let's say, waterfall, traditional project management, but we can also do it in small steps, be much more agile about it. So, and it's all about continual improvement as well. That's one of the major areas, because I mean, ITIL has recognized it in the past and still does it, that anything that we do can be improved, right? It doesn't matter if it's a practice, a process, if it's a certain function that we have or services, can be better somehow. And then we should strive for that. That's why it's actually one of the, I mean, it happens on different levels in ITIL4. We have it happening on a company level, like, you know, the services that we are selling to our customers, those should be improved all the time. And we are really talking about also the individual practices, like how we deliver those services. Okay. That's very important.
Yeah. So because I'm a bit of a noob on ITIL, so how can I imagine this, that I'm really interested in that value system that you provide, because we could also use it. Are you going to express the value that a certain service has in terms of money or like time, or how does that work?
That depends. Typical consultant answer on what the business actually wants. Okay. And that's the important part. And this is strongly emphasized in ITIL4, that you should really sit together with your customers and go into the detail on what is actually valuable. And that's and even that should be defined on different levels, because it's one thing that you may talk to like a CEO or a CEO of a company who tells you what is valuable to him or her. But maybe there isn't a completely different value proposal necessary for somebody who works in a different part of the organization, like a user who is actually utilizing the service. And that needs to be exploited. That needs to be understood. Because in the end, the value a service proposes to a customer is strongly dependent on the perception of those people who are using it. Okay. And that's why it always starts with this kind of engagement that I mentioned before. The first service value chain activity is usually engaged, because you got to sit down with your customer, with your stakeholders on different levels, and really understand what is important to them. And then that can be translated into actual services or products that you deliver to your customer. But it's really all about that co-creation of trying to put myself into the shoes of my stakeholders and you know, understand what their pain points are. And then if I can fix those pain points, then my service is probably going to be valuable. And in that case, the financial aspect can be even secondary, because if you really hit the nail on the head, so to say, right? If your service is really remedying one of those pain points, I'm pretty sure customers would be, you know, willing to pay more.
Yeah, right. So for instance, if you want to improve the turnaround time of getting incident solved, then you're going to measure that as a value point.
Certainly. Certainly, that would be a value point. Sure. I mean, who is willing to wait for a long time for an incident resolution, right?
Yeah.
So that could be an interesting KPI.
Is it then a big difference between the service level agreements and what's being measured there, and the new value system which is existing on ITIL4?
No, you still have service level agreements in place, and you still have most of the processes which you know from ITIL3, like, you know, incident change, problem management, service request management, that stuff. It's still around. Now they call it practices. So that's kind of a change in the wording, because it implies that it's not only about the steps that need to be executed to you know, reach your output, but it's also about different other aspects, like what knowledge you need to be able to reach that outcome, what interactions you have with, let's say, vendors or service providers, with other organizational units, and so on. And yeah, that's actually a very interesting part here.
Yeah.
How you interact.
It's interesting to know how you do how do you measure this? Yeah. How do you quantify satisfaction of your customer, if that's a part of the value system that you built, right?
It should be. It should certainly be. Well, one of the things you can do is running customer satisfaction surveys, for sure. There are many ways of how you can conduct that. And sure, you can ask the people who are utilizing the service, you know, how happy they are. And then you have a pretty good vision. Although I must admit that there are a lot of companies probably being afraid of that, asking the end users directly about feedback, because what happens if it's bad? Oh my God!
Yeah.
But even bad feedback is good feedback, right? So
Yeah, right. But so getting feedback from customers, any best practices there? Because whenever we ask surveys during a survey, how was our service? The response is really low. It's like
yeah,
5%
and
or
it's
something.
mostly negative responses, because when people are fed up, they're probably gonna reply something, right? But if people are happy, nobody tells them.
Yeah.
Well, you can incentivize to the service, so you can tell people, like you get a discount or something, or you get something for a little freebie if you reply to that. And yeah, besides that, it's not a real, how should I say, you cannot really make people
Yeah.
reply to that survey. You can make it attractive to them, but yeah, I know that struggle. It's really hard,
Yeah.
because feedback is important. On the other hand, you really need to make that feedback count when you receive it. So
Mm.
I think that's one of the important points, that if people see that change, based on the feedback they gave, then they will probably be, happy in future as well to give
Yeah.
feedback. But it's
And
challenging.
do you see a difference there between like a B2B type of services or B2C? Um,
Honestly, no, I see the same thing happening.
okay.
I mean, in the end, even if you have a B2B
Mm.
service, it's also people on the other end, right? That other B is
Yeah,
also a
yeah,
person in the end. It's probably some kind of business representative or some kind of vendor manager in the customer organization. And it's usually one single point of contact we're talking about here, who is then providing feedback, right, to your customer manager, account manager, or whoever is managing the
yeah.
customer.
Right.
So yeah, I see the same patterns happening. I see the same stuff. People usually tend to give extensive feedback if something went wrong. And if there has been escalations and major incidents and whatnot, you probably can expect a lot of feedback. But
Yeah, right.
probably it's the more important part here is probably to build good relationships.
Mm-hmm.
To talk to those people and really have that personal contact with them, and make them understand why their feedback is so important to you.
Yeah.
And if you apply that personal factor even in a B2B interaction, then you probably have higher chances
Yeah,
to get
it
feedback.
does makes a lot of sense. It's indeed, and if you can measure that and improve on it, on how you create these reports with your contacts, customers, or that makes a lot of sense. There was something that you just mentioned, which triggered my attention. Also, is ITIL in combination with agile processes. Um, so we well, there's a we consider a big difference between service organizations and development organizations. So could you highlight a bit on that topic?
Yeah, sure. Very interesting topic. Actually, had that conversation a lot of times. And what's important to note is that you have, I mean, there is no either or relationship between the service management part and the agile software product development part, because that product and software development is part of service management. So if you can imagine it, it's like the bigger construct is service management, and then one part of that is the how you create and deliver new services part or products, right? That's more
Hmm.
this agile, where agile can be applied. And then you still have the other part, which is more the operational part.
Yeah.
And that's where often a lot of conflicts emerge, because probably also heard DevOps, right? I mean, that also goes into that direction where you always have these struggles, like development teams always want to create cool new services to customers and publish these cool features all the time, and then you have operations teams who are like, oh no, we need to have stable services before we can introduce new stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then that's a remedy. So what I'm saying is that if you apply it right, ITIL4 can have very good and strong and stable synergies with the agile way of thinking or agile mindset. And ITIL4 has a lot of elements of agile
Mm.
included. And it's not only about agile; it's also about lean, for example. I mean, in the end, agile also builds on lean, and ITIL also does that. One of the examples is ITIL4 has introduced the guiding principles. That's one of the new things. And you have one which is called focus on value. And then you have one which is called start where you are. And the next one is called progress iteratively with feedback. And these are all things which you can also see in the Agile world, right? Especially that progress iteratively with feedback. It's nothing new. It's just it has been adopted because Excelos actually recognized the fact, the trend going towards Agile.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing is we should not forget that Agile is not a standalone. You cannot run a whole company by implementing Scrum in it, or Safe or any other Agile framework.
Yeah.
It's more a mindset. It's a way of thinking that I don't want to run huge projects where I do a lot of planning up front, and then I hope that the customer requirements do not change in the course of the project, because they always change. Rather, you go these baby steps, right? And you do replanning all the time, and you do this iterative approach, and it's much more powerful.
So true. So what you're saying is that the feedback that you get out of your support channel, or service desk, or whatever, gets fed immediately into the development activities.
Should
Right?
be, should be. Ideally, the service desk itself should have a direct link to the development organization. That could be by ticketing system. Usually it's done by ticketing system, right? But it could be also any other channel. I've seen organizations where the service desk was actually not a separate team, but it was composed of different people who are sitting in a different development teams. There was a true Scrum organization where you had like only Scrum teams. And in each Scrum team, you had like one dedicated person who was being part of that Scrum team, but was also working on a service desk. And that meant that that person had firsthand information on all the developments that were happening, and ideally even had some development experience as well, so they could help on a much deeper level when a customer called on a service desk.
Yeah, it's really like having the voice of the customer in your Scrum team.
Ideally,
or like
yeah.
But also like during the planning phase of your development, you could really reprioritize some of the like support issues. Huh? So
There could be a trend analysis. Absolutely right. So listening to what customers say and what they complain a lot. And then, I mean, if you are having a Scrum organization or an Agile organization, you usually have a product owner, or even, I mean, more per team, you have a product owner. And then these service desk inputs would probably be fed to this product owner guy or lady. And then they would prioritize those into the backlog of the team.
Yeah. Okay, I can understand that. Thank you for the details. So one of the things that we also wondering is if you have like multiple help desks, is this something that you also encounter?
Oh yeah, a lot.
And so could you elaborate? Like I was thinking about the so you have a customer service desk, but also you have like the internal service desk, and that all need to feed into the same product backlog.
Yep.
So there's a bit of tension between prioritizing this type of issues. So any advice that you could formulate there?
Yeah, I would say if you can make sure you have a common tool in place, which is used by all the teams working in support, even if it's business customer support and then the internal ID support, because it helps you reduce the friction between those teams, and it helps to, as you said, have like common backlogs where the prioritization of issues is much easier, and you don't have that much conflict between business issue and IT internal issue. And on the other side, it's certainly important again to have this kind of collaboration between those teams. And it's not only about business support and internal support. I also see a lot of conflicts when it comes to external vendors who are also having their own service desks, and then how you integrate those with your own internal service desk organization, right? And there you also have always the same issues. It's the tooling problem. They probably use different tools, and even if they use the same tool by some kind of accident, there is no active interface, usually no active interface between those two, because it's probably hard to implement, and even if it's implemented, it's probably not that stable, and it's probably very expensive. I had one of those projects myself. It was kind of challenging. We tried to integrate two major ticketing systems with each other, and it would have been a cost of 150,000 Swiss francs, which is, I don't know, 170,000 US dollars or something. Yeah, it was really a lot, and it was only a mapping of fields. It was like a one-on-one mapping where it says that in one tool the incident ID field is called incident ID, and in the other tool it's called incident number, and then those two fields need to be linked. And it was just an API, nothing else. And
Yeah.
it still was a huge configuration and development,
Yeah.
and that is certainly a challenge. So some kind of standardization is advisable, and then
Does that exist ITIL? The like standardization of
yeah. There is
tickets?
one guiding principle actually, which talks about that. One of them is called optimize and automate,
Okay.
and that's exactly about that. We should try to really make it as simple and as easy as possible. Our processes, our tools, our integrations, and everything, because in the end, somebody needs to support that stuff. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's too complex, and we lose the oversight, and we have lost. So it's really about simplification as much as possible and automation, because we want to try to maximize the value of human work, so we can really concentrate on stuff that needs humans, like decision making.
Yeah.
But everything that it can be done by a bot should be done by a bot.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I think that in this kind of cross-company setups, the getting to an agreement, how you work together, and the semantics of a ticket are important, right? How do you
Absolutely right.
how do you categorize these things, especially the orchestration between the different workflows?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. It's actually hard. I mean, a good approach would be, instead of having a vendor management function in your organization, to have a CM set up in your organization. If you have that as a, with all the capabilities
Mm.
and the necessary how should I say, accountabilities set up, and with the necessary decision making power as well, then you can then you have a good possibility to create some common processes which you can try to apply over your vendors. But it will not work all the time, especially if you think about cloud vendors. those
Yeah.
are those are vendors which you will probably not be able to, how should I say, convince to follow your ticketing guidelines and documentation guidelines and whatever, because they have hundreds or even thousands of customers, and they need to be standardized. And then it's, yeah, that's it. And in that case, I mean, you need to recognize this fact, and you need to
Mm.
have a CM function in place who is then capable to do this work manually. It's not a cool thing to do manual work, but I mean, sometimes
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
necessary.
you have to do it, but in,
And yeah,
indeed, having such a standard, maybe there's something to look into. Is if such a standards can emerge, because more and more companies need to work together in a structured way. It would be an interesting thing
it is.
to, to
Yeah.
research.
It's on its way. Actually, Axelos has been working on this with different companies, and they have included the service integration and management practice also into their latest publications.
Mm-hmm.
And courses and everything, but it hasn't been around for enough time to have actual, how should I say,
Impact.
experiences and
Yeah,
impact. Yeah, yeah. More and more companies are doing it because they recognize the fact that we are going into a multi-vendor world where we are taking the best in breed vendors for everything, and
mm,
going away from those monolithic huge vendors where one vendor did everything for me.
yeah.
um, but yeah, it brings those challenges because you need to somehow coordinate those. I mean, if you have 10 little vendors over one big one, they all have different
And
tools, processes, and so on.
and
Challenging.
is that a promise of CM? Is to be able to switch vendors whenever it's necessary, or
Kind of. It's yeah. One of the benefits that are stated for having a good CM in place is this. Yes, that you should be able to. I mean, by having standardized processes across your vendors, you should be able to more easily find somebody who could fit into that. And once you selected them, they should be able to easily fit into this environment you have created, into this service
mm,
value network, I would call it.
yeah,
um, Especially if you also have the right tooling in place. If you have built up your CM with background tools which easily allow you to connect those technically, really like interface
mm,
wise, right? And if you have set up a good standard for that, then you should be
should be
able to easily
to,
integrate a new vendor
yeah.
into that environment.
It really sounds that such a CM is more meant for enterprises. And what's your take on that?
Yeah, if you got a small company, you probably don't have the resources to build a separate CM, but
Yeah.
you still have the flexibility to have a good relationship in person with all of those vendors which you have, because you probably don't have that much vendors, right? I mean, if you're a
No,
company
right.
of 10
Yeah.
people or 100
No,
people,
but
you don't have that
I'm
many.
talking between like companies of 500 to
Yeah.
2,000 people, and then you get like these huge enterprises with 10,000 or more employees. So that's probably a big difference. Do you see any difference there for the rolling out ITIL processes between like mid-market companies and enterprises?
Absolutely. Yeah. First of all, I mean, ITIL still has a couple of roles in place that should be fulfilled by some people to make those practices successful. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you need to have a practice owner, and you need to have maybe some, I don't know, owners of services, owners of, different accountabilities. And in huge enterprises, you probably have the manpower to put that into the right hands. In smaller organizations, you probably will not be able to live all the practices a huge organization would be able to live. But you
Mm-hmm.
need to concentrate on the ones which are most important for you. So you're going to have a strong incident management practice, maybe a good knowledge management, a good change enablement, maybe a good service level management.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
then if you go if you go into huge company, 10,000s of employees, you're going to probably have, how should I say, have a bigger need to concentrate on, let's say, business relationship management or availability management.
A lot
Right.
of management, right?
Oh yeah, they are all called something management, except for change, because that's called change enablement now.
Yeah. All of this is interesting. So how do you, um, regarding the services that you provide, are you providing specific help to companies to incorporate these ITIL processes?
You mean
So
we as a company, like we as
yeah,
Value Insights, if we provide?
yes.
Yes. What we do is, besides the training, we also have this this assessment, more or less, that we
Mhm.
make, where we go to the company and try to understand what their pain points are. There are different tools which we utilize. For example, one of them is called the design thinking workshop. That's kind of very powerful thing,
Okay.
where we identify these main problem areas and then try to find a remedy for that. And those are the things we tackle first, and then we try to understand which of the practices and approaches will be the most appropriate to remedy the customers pain points, because it's not necessarily always ETL that needs to be implemented in this case. Sometimes it's, they have an issue with agile approaches. Sometimes they have a completely different issue. So we
So
kind of try to pick the
you're
best
also
tool.
covering like safe, like calling out safe into companies
Yeah,
and all this good
exactly.
stuff.
Implementing Scrum, rolling out Safe, exactly.
Yeah,
That's also in our portfolio.
nice. No, that's really interesting to know.
Yeah, I think as well, because especially with this everlasting conflict in the heads of people between service management and agile product development. I
Mm-hmm.
really like to convince people about how well these can work together, instead of always seeing the differences and be like, oh, in ETL I have change requests, in Safe or Scrum I have stories. How can it work together?
Yeah,
And then I tell people, I mean, it's the same thing. A change request is a story. And then people are like, indeed. But
yeah,
most people don't think about it like that.
yeah. And the challenge is indeed is to sequence the planning around these, right, and prioritization.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's always a big issue. One of the things I've recently encountered, and it's one of the more interesting topics I've been working on, that is how you do the prioritization of incidents versus plannable work
Mm-hmm.
in an environment where you have operational people, right? Like traditional organization, but with ops people versus the developers as well. But they are still working in a Scrum environment, so that's very interesting, because you still have the product owner who should be doing the prioritization of everything, including plannable and unplannable work.
Yeah,
But you still have a service desk who is getting the calls from the users, who are very
yeah,
who need quick solutions. So yeah, that's challenging
I'm a bit
and
wondering
interesting.
how our audience is thinking about this type of integration between a service organization and a product development organization, and how these two can match. So, if there are any questions on this, or like reactions or viewpoints, please be sure that we are listening, and please ask these questions. Okay, Alex, I would say I think that I have to wrap up, but I thank you a lot for your insights on these topics, and I hope it was also interesting for you to present it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was very fun and I enjoyed it.
All right, thank you.